scriptures, maybe we'll do a quick catch-up for those who haven't been here to understand what's going on, the context. So we've been hearing in this 9th chapter the dynasty of Ikshvaku, actually. So those who have read Bhagavad Gita should know who Ikshvaku is. Krishna says at the beginning of the 4th chapter to Arjuna, he says that he spoke this imperishable science of bhakti yoga originally to the sun god, Vivasvan. And Vivasvan in turn instructed his own son, Vaivasvata Manu. And Manu in turn instructed his son, Ikshvaku. So in this canto, we're hearing about the descendants of Ikshvaku, and at this point, we've come to the personality called Anshuman, after a long list of names. Anshuman is the descendant of the sons of Sagara. The sons of Sagara, somehow or other, offended Kapila Dev. And we all know that making offenses to great souls is basically self-destruction. So they indeed basically self-destructed. The heat in their bodies became so intense that they burned to ashes. So the sons of Sagara are now a pile of ashes. And Anshuman is desiring their deliverance. As any good son or grandson or descendant wishes, they wish for their ancestors to be delivered. So he was told by Kapila Dev, he approached Kapila Dev to beg his forgiveness, and he said, yes, your ancestors, the sons of Sagara, can indeed be delivered, but only by the sacred water of the Ganges. Because this is water which has emanated from Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. Okay, so now his job is to bring Mother Ganga to earth. He attempts to do so, but he fails. After his demise, his son Dilipa takes up the same task to petition Mother Ganga to come to earth. He also fails, and he passes away. Then Anshuman, then his son Bhagirath takes up the task, and he succeeds. So Mother Ganga agrees to come to earth, which means Bhumandala, the big disk referred to as earth. Anyway, and specifically to the central section called Jambudvip. So Mother Ganga agrees to come to earth under two conditions: that some male figure who's very powerful will catch her current as she rapidly flows to earth with great force, because otherwise she'll bust right through earth and go all the way down to the Patala planetary systems, the lower planetary systems. And she also said that she had another concern, that when I come to earth, all the impious people are going to bathe in my waters in order to be purified of their sins. So they're going to deposit all their bad karma in me. I'm going to become filthy. So I don't want that either. So how are you going to deal with these two situations? So Bhagirath successfully dealt with those situations. He nicely pleased Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva, out of his kindness, agreed to be the personality that would catch the Ganga as she flows down to earth, and he would catch it on his head. He was powerful enough to accept that force. And he also, Bhagirath also promised that great saintly personalities would be taking birth and living in the earthly plane, and that they would go to the Ganga and bathe. And by the saintly persons bathing in the Ganga, they would purify the Ganga of the sinful reactions that were deposited there. Okay, so all is well and good. Bhagirath passes away. And there's a long list of descendants. And one of his descendants, named Suradas. He was a king. If you notice, all the personalities we're discussing, from Vivishvan to Manu to Ikshvaku, a whole huge line of lineage down to Anshuman, down to Bhagirath, and then a whole huge lineage down to Suradas. If you notice, these are all kings, Kshatriyas. One wonders why the Bhagavatam is spending so much time talking about and thinking about and reminiscing about all these kings. I thought we were supposed to be, you know, meditating on Brahmanas and Vaishnavas and what have you. But actually, Krishna also told Arjuna at the beginning of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that this parampara has been handed down through Rajarshis, through saintly kings. He doesn't say it's been handed down through Brahmanas or sannyasis. He says it's been handed down through kings. And why is that? Because the kings have the sole responsibility for organizing society in such a way that everyone can become materially and spiritually successful. They're not the spiritual teachers. The Brahmanas are indeed the spiritual teachers. But without the Kshatriyas giving them facility and protection, they can't teach anybody. So the Rajarshis are considered by Krishna the recipients of this transcendental knowledge to protect it. They have to know it well enough so they understand to value. You can't value something if you don't understand the value of it. You give a child a diamond, first thing they do is put it in their mouth, because they don't understand the value of it, so they'll just throw it in the garbage or something. So it behooves the leaders of society to understand the value of transcendental knowledge, not because they're going to be the teachers of transcendental knowledge, that's the job of the Brahmanas, but without the Kshatriyas or leaders properly appreciating the value, they won't protect it. They won't facilitate it. So now we've come down to this Suradas. He's also a king. And somehow or other, he went to the forest, because kings go to the forest and they practice killing animals usually, because their job is to protect the citizens, so they have to do some target shooting, you know, practice. So they go and they kill animals. Well, one day he went to the forest and he killed a man-eater, a cannibal. And that cannibal that he killed had a brother, and that brother wanted to get revenge on Suradas. So in his attempts to get revenge, when Suradas invited his guru, Vashishta, to have lunch at his house, this man-eater's brother, who's also a man-eater, played the role of Surdas's cook. He fed Vashishta human flesh. Vashishta figured that out before he even ate it, and he got really mad at Surdas, you can imagine, even though it wasn't really his fault. So Vashishta, he has like temper, you know? So he cursed Surdas, you're going to become a man-eater. You'll be no better than a man-eater. So that was a great demotion in Surdas's life, because he was a saintly king. All right, so now we're caught up to date. Surdas has been cursed by Vashishta. He goes to the forest, and he can't overcome his man-eating propensity because he's been cursed by Vashishta. So he's forced to act as a man-eater. So one day he was hungry, and he came upon a couple, a Brahmana and his wife. And he approached that male Brahmana to eat him. The wife immediately objects. So what we're hearing now is the wife of that Brahmana speaking to Surdas, who isn't really meant to be a man-eater, but has been cursed to act like a man-eater. But he's actually in the great lineage from Ikshvaku. So today we're reading from 9th chapter, text 31. And this is the wife of the Brahmana speaking. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 31, please repeat. Tasya sadur apapasya. Tasya sadur apapasya. Brunasya brahmavadinaha. Brunasya brahmavadinaha. Katam vadam yata babror. Katam vadam yata babror. Manyate sanmato bhavan. Manyate sanmato bhavan. Tasya sadura papasya. Brunasya brahmavadinaha. Katam vadam yata babror. Manyate sanmato bhavan. Please chant. Tasya sadura. Brunasya Brahmavadinaha Katam Badam Yata Babur Manyate Sanmato Bhavan Tasya Sadura Papasya Brunasya Brahmavadinaha Katam Badam Yata Babror Manyate Sanmato Bhavan. Word for word synonyms, please repeat. Tasya, of him. Sadho, of the great saintly person. Apapasya, of one who has no sinful life. Brunasya, of the embryo. Brahmavadinaha, of one who is well versed in Vedic knowledge. Katam, how. Vadam, the killing. Yata, as. Babro, of a cow. Manyate, you are thinking. Satmataha, well recognized by higher circles. Bhavan, your good self. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. You are well known and worshipped in learned circles. How dare you kill this Brahmana, who is saintly, sinless person, well versed in Vedic knowledge? Killing him would be like destroying the embryo within the womb or killing a cow. Purport. As stated in the Amarakosha dictionary, Brunor Bakke Balagarbe. The word Bruna refers either to the cow or to the living entity in embryo. According to Vedic culture, destroying the undeveloped embryo of the soul in the womb is as sinful as killing a cow or a brahmana. In the embryo, the living entity is present in an undeveloped stage. The modern scientific theory that life is a combination of chemicals is nonsense. Scientists cannot manufacture living beings, even like those born from eggs. The idea that scientists can develop a chemical situation resembling that of an egg and bring life from it is nonsensical. Their theory that a chemical combination can have life may be accepted, but these rascals cannot create such a combination. This verse refers to Brunasya Vadam, the killing of a Bruna, or destruction of the embryo. Here is a challenge from the Vedic literature. The crude, atheistic understanding that the living entity is a combination of matter belongs to the grossest ignorance. So here we see that the wife of the Brahmana is actually very learned, and she's immediately telling Soradas that by killing this saintly Brahmana, how is that any different than killing a cow or the embryo in the womb? If we were to say that to a human being today on planet Earth, go to a college campus and tell them ask them, what do you think about murder? There's a lot of uproar these days about police killing citizens who often are actually totally innocent, but some misunderstanding or whatever. So they kill people. But to speak of all the wars and the crimes, and everybody is, you know, disgusted with murder. And they go on rallies, you know. Now, if you were to say to a typical college student, who I only pick out the college students because they're supposed to be educated. I mean, we could just pick any Joe off the street, you know, but I specifically am talking about college students because they're so-called educated. And if you said to them, what do you think about this statement? The statement is that killing a human being, oh yeah, killing a human being, that killing a human being, that is as bad as killing the embryo in the womb or a cow. They would look at you like, what? What? What's wrong with killing a cow? That's our food. What's wrong with killing an embryo in the womb? And oh, by the way, it's not killing because it's just a bag of flesh. It's just a lump, you know, almost like a tumor, an unwanted growth. They couldn't even comprehend this one verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is not even talking about like Ananya Bhakti or anything. You know, we're just talking about like principles of civilized human beings here. ABC education. And here's a simple wife of a Brahmana living in the forest. And she knows this, that killing of a Brahmana is likened to killing an embryo or a cow. She understands the horrible sin involved in killing an embryo or a cow. Today's college students can't comprehend that. What to speak of Joe on the street. And why do they think that it's okay? Okay, hopefully they don't think just killing a human being is okay. They can kind of comprehend this is a living entity, but they can't comprehend that the embryo or the cow is in the equal category of that living entity. Why is that? Because they actually don't even understand what is life. You know, a small child, a 2-year-old child, we can do this homework assignment. Go find 2-year-old children, go to a preschool. There's lots of preschools in the Chicago area, daycare, whatever they call them. Find 2-year-old children and take them on a walk and see if they can distinguish the difference between that which is alive and that which is dead. Every single one of them will say, ooh, there's a dead squirrel in the road. Ooh, yuck. And when they see a squirrel jumping around, they're like, oh, there's a squirrel, let's go feed it nuts. They understand the difference between life and non-life. But today, our the institutes of higher education have actually taken things in 180 degrees, you know, turn around, taking it into the opposite direction. And they're actually teaching people that life is just a combination of chemicals. Right? Didn't you learn that in school? Life is just a combination of chemicals. I learned that in school. I suppose you learned it too, right? That life is just a combination of chemicals. And due to this theory that life is just a combination of chemicals, then we can just make our own rules about when it's okay to kill and when it's not okay to kill. So if the embryo in the womb is something we don't want, it's an inconvenience, then we can rationalize it. Well, it's just a bunch of chemicals. Nobody laments that if you spill some, ketchup on the floor, it's just some chemicals. Just wipe it up and go buy a new bottle. So this is just like a bag of ketchup. I'm hungry, I have to eat. The cows are here, and the other animals for that matter, they're here for my palate. What's the problem? I see the animals eat other animals, and I've learned in my evolution class 101 that man is an animal. Therefore, I can also eat animals. So, although Srila Prabhupada sacrificed his life to come to the West to preach Krishna consciousness, when you read his books and listen to his lectures, you'll be amazed to find like 50% of his words are about defeating the atheistic, demonic teaching that consciousness is a product of matter. And we shouldn't be naive to think that we don't also have to preach on this point. Krishna begins with this right at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. When and where in Bhagavad Gita does Krishna begin his instructions to Arjuna? What do you think, Bhakta Alex? Do you recall where Krishna's instructions begin? It is chapter 2, and where about in chapter 2? Yeah, he doesn't start until into chapter 2, like text 11. He starts chastising Arjuna. And he starts giving his instructions. So right there at the beginning, in text 17, he's only spoken like 6 verses. And at the very beginning, text 17, he tells Arjuna, you should understand that that which pervades the entire body, consciousness is that which pervades the entire body. And this consciousness is indestructible. Nobody can destroy this imperishable soul or unit of consciousness. So if you can't destroy something, you don't have the power to destroy something, nor do you have the legal right to destroy something. What's the corollary to that? If you don't have the right or the power to destroy something, then you also don't have the power to create that something. So this is the improper teaching of modern science. They say they can create life. And Prabhupada many, many times would bring up this challenge. Oh, can you create an egg? We're not even asking you to create life. We're asking you to create the egg from which life might, take birth from. Can you create a seed from which life might take birth from? Interestingly, in today's purport, Prabhupada said, we will accept, and we can accept, and we do accept the scientist's statement that when there's a proper combination of chemicals, we can find that life manifests there. He says we accept that statement. However, there's a caveat to that. Is that we have to understand why, when there's a proper combination of chemicals, does life manifest. Just like nobody moves into a building when it's only 25% built. You know, you might have the foundation and a couple of supporting beams or whatever. You don't move into the building until all the combination is together, walls and bathroom and kitchen or whatever. When all the ingredients are put together nicely, oh, now we can move into our new house. Similarly, when the chemicals come together in the form of an egg or the form of a seed or whatever, then the soul can enter and make that their apartment. So Prabhupada challenged, we don't even ask you to create life, we're just asking you to create the egg from which life might manifest. So this is a challenge that Prabhupada put out 45 years ago, and nobody's met it yet. Not one person's come close to meeting his challenge. So this is a very insidious teaching, that consciousness is a product of matter. In fact, we see at the universities, a rapidly growing field is neuroscience. And you might say, well, that's nice, you know, we're going to have some more brain surgeons to fight brain cancer or something. No, the field of neuroscience has really gotten big and is rapidly growing because a major department within neuroscience is study of consciousness. And their objective is to prove that consciousness is an electrochemical reaction only. So Krishna already knows that in Kali Yuga such bogus teachers are going to be there. So in chapter 7, 15th verse, he says these people are Mayaya Paritagyana, that their actual knowledge has been stolen by illusion. This is the power of Maya, the illusory energy that makes us think that which is not is, and that which is not. That's what Maya means. To accept something that's false as true and to accept something that is true as false. So one can study neuroscience till the cows come home, and they may very well come to the conclusion that consciousness is a product of biochemical and electrochemical reactions in the brain. Only because it's so tricky that they can't get to the bottom of the original cause. So this is called the cheating propensity. The cheating propensity means we don't actually know how to create life. But we're going to teach everybody that life is a chemical reaction. So the 4 defects of the conditioned soul. We have imperfect senses. And because we have imperfect senses, we make mistakes. I thought I saw a rope over there, a snake over there, it was really a rope. So because of our imperfect senses, we make mistakes and we're in illusion. And the biggest illusion we have is that which I perceive with my senses is reality, is true. We're in such illusion that we don't realize we have an imperfect body. So with our imperfect senses, we make mistakes, we're in illusion, and despite all that, we turn around and play the role of teachers. That's called cheating. Prabhupada would say they're not teachers, they're cheaters. They're cheaters. So I never found this on the Vedabase, but one devotee they said that Prabhupada said, so you know how those Prabhupada said goes. But in relation to the Bhaktivedanta Institute, the scientific arm of the preaching movement, they said that Prabhupada said that worship of Radha and Krishna is our private affair, and defeating the scientists is our public affair. So I was never able to find the original source of such quote, but I think Prabhupada did indeed embody that mood, that defeating the scientists is our part of our public preaching. So we as devotees have to become thoroughly convinced of this fact, that life is not a bag of chemicals. Consciousness is independent of matter. And when we're thoroughly convinced, then we can have some confidence to go out and meet the public and offer them an alternative to what they're being taught in school. It might require a little bit of background knowledge about what they're being taught, so you can talk their terms and what have you, but that's what preaching's all about. So we'll stop there, but the nice point is that this wife of the Brahmana is starting off right in the same point that Krishna started off in Bhagavad Gita. She's not speaking about love of God and how to attain love of God. She's immediately starting off with the same lesson Krishna started off with, that consciousness is sacred. Consciousness is not material. We have no right to take the body of a conscious being, and that it's a great sin. So maybe we can ask if there's any discussion. Paramakrona Prabhu.
Thank you for this beautiful class and preparing us for the next school semester. It seems that the way the way Prabhupada has given us that worshipping Radha and Krishna is our internal affair, and dealing with the scientist is external affairs. It seems really, really hard to make the people even understand that they are not a body, they are a soul. Because in the 2 minutes of time, talking to the kid and giving the book, and how to explain about the Ananya Bhakti, they are so much involved in this deep education when you go and preach. It's literally, sometimes I feel that they will not even trust this book also. I'm giving Bhagavad Gita, but will they trust this book? Because they are so much involved in this artificial education. So how to say them that you are not a body, you are a soul? That's the first thing. And the whole thing is that how to make them involved in Ananya Bhakti, that not Ananya Bhakti, but even Bhakti.
Well, you might be trying to accomplish more than you're expected to accomplish on book distribution. When we're out distributing books, we're obviously, unless somebody's willing to sit down and talk to you for an hour or something, we're not in the illusion that we're going to talk to somebody for 2-3 minutes and have them walk away totally fired up about learning about Ananya Bhakti and surrender to Krishna and this, that, and the other thing. Our approach generally on book distribution, I mean, everybody distributes books differently, but our approach on book distribution is basically to meet people and inquire from them, or try to spark in them the desire for knowledge about the self. Now, when is a person actually open to transcendental knowledge? Oh, so many people have time, they're not interested in transcendental knowledge. When can a person actually be interested in transcendental knowledge? When can a person actually be a recipient of transcendental knowledge? Jacqueline? When they open their heart. Thank you. And yes, let's clarify, and then let's clarify that a little bit. We're following the example of Arjuna. What happened to Arjuna to make him open his heart to transcendental knowledge? I'm sorry? Conflict. And you know what that conflict was? He was having an existential crisis right there on the battlefield. He fought many wars before. He's a brave, heroic warrior. He's not a wimp or anything. But today when he goes to war, all of a sudden he breaks down crying like a kid. He's shaking. He can't even pick up his bow and arrows and fight. And Krishna's just looking at him like, what's wrong with you? So what was wrong with Arjuna that day? For the first time, he never had this before when he went to war, but today when he goes to war, he's having an existential crisis. Why is he having an existential crisis? Because he doesn't see strangers on the other side to fight with. He sees family members. By seeing family members, friends, teachers, etc., he gets totally consumed in the bodily conception of life. And he's like, I can't kill these people. They're my friends and neighbors and family members. So he has a conflict. And what is the conflict? A conflict of interest. What is the conflict of interest? Well, an identity crisis. It's because of an identity crisis. That's why he's having a conflict. Because on one hand, he says, I'm a state warrior. My job is to kill these people, right? So that's a no-brainer. I'm a state warrior, pick up my bow and arrows and shoot. But the other side of me says, I'm a family man, and those are my family members. And the rule of family life is, you never kill your family members. You forgive, you forgive, you forgive. You're supposed to protect them, not kill them. So he has an identity crisis. Am I a warrior? Draw a little flow chart. Who am I? Am I a warrior? Yes. Okay, then I'm supposed to kill them. Or am I a family man? Yes, then I'm not supposed to kill them. So he doesn't know what to do. And he breaks down crying. He has a total anxiety attack right there on the battlefield. And Krishna just smiles and looks at him. And then Arjuna says, I can't solve this dilemma. Please instruct me. I'm looking for answers. I have questions. I got a lot of questions, but I don't have any answers. And I can't figure out the answers on my own. And material science hasn't helped me answer my questions. I'm still unsatisfied. So then Krishna says, thank you, Arjuna, for submitting. Let's sit here and have a talk. And he begins with, you're not that body. What are you talking about? Sit down here. We have to have a conversation. And he just spends the whole chapter talking about how you're not the body. Can't you see the difference between matter and spirit? Come on, a kid can do so. Even animals can do so. The animals have that propensity to protect their children. And humans are so degraded, they want to kill the children. So when we're out on book distribution, we're praying to Krishna. I'm not the doer. I can't just pull somebody out of the crowd and get them to be interested in the subject matter. We have to pray to Krishna that there's lots of souls out there, too many. Certainly, just by probability theory, just by chance, or whatever, the probability or the chances are that there's somebody out there who's having an existential crisis. And that's who we're looking for. And believe me, on the college campuses, there's a lot of people having existential crises. But the more they party and the more they enjoy all the oceans of sense gratification being poured down upon them and the new varieties that they're being introduced to, the more that existential crisis gets drowned out and they forget that they have these questions. So our job is to pray to Super Soul. Because how are they going to remember that they have these questions? How is somebody going to remember through all that noise of sense gratification and being dumbed down by the educational system and dulled by intoxication and, sex life and whatever? How in all that is somebody going to remember that I've had questions for many years? Where's that memory going to come from? Who's been reading Bhagavad Gita? What does Krishna say? 15:15. I'll give you. Apohanam, that from me come forgetfulness, apohanam, and smritir, remembrance. So, Paramatma's in everyone's heart, including our own. So when we go out on book distribution or whatever method for meeting the public, it's Super Soul and Super Soul. So if I plead to my Super Soul to please send people this way, send people into my path that might be having existential crisis that I could give this book to, then it'll happen. Maybe we won't distribute 150 books. Maybe we'll only distribute 20 books because we'll be meeting such sweet souls who have real questions. They're going to sit there and talk to us for a while, And then other books will just be going out like water, So we can't make people interested in self-realization or make people interested in Ananya Bhakti. But we can pray to the Super Soul to re-spark their interest. Everybody has had an existential crisis. You are a complete dishonest person if you say you've never had an existential crisis. It doesn't have to be like you had an anxiety attack and broke down or something. But we've all had questions. Everybody has questions. I heard a statistic long ago that 70%, that's a lot, 70% of youth in America, and youth was defined as 24 or younger, that 70% of youth in America have at least one time in their life contemplated suicide. Existential crisis. So we introduce the books to people and, say whatever you want to say, but, we try to tell people. I like to do that. I show them the picture of Krishna and Arjuna, and I actually tell them, Arjuna's going to war and he's having an existential crisis. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't want to kill. He doesn't want to be killed. And right there on the battlefield, he's having an existential crisis about who am I and what am I supposed to do? And then I ask them, have you ever thought like that? And everybody chuckles and says, yes. We show them the picture of the changing bodies, So who am I? Am I this biochemical machine which is constantly changing? Or am I something non-material that never changes and never dies? What happens to that conscious self at the point of death? And you point to the picture and you ask them, so what do you think? And most of them shrug their shoulders. I don't know, good question. And then you say, okay, this book answers the questions. Just get them interested. Because if you talk to them about self-realization and existential crisis, many people will admit, I have considered this before. Yes, this is something I find interesting. So pray to Paramatma to send us sincere. We're not out there to be successful salespersons. We're out there to rescue souls that are ready to be rescued. So it depends. Do you see yourself as a salesperson or do you see yourself as a preacher? It doesn't mean you have to sit there and talk. The books do the talking. So Krishna will reciprocate. And he's always going to test us. Are we just interested in results? How many books did I distribute? How much Lakshmi did I collect? Or are we interested in finding those souls who are crying? People are crying out of pain. Oh, they have the big smiles on their face, and they're drinking at the frat party, you know. They're having a good old time at the frat party with the big smile, and some girls come and this and that. But they're miserable. They're actually crying. And they're going to continue to cry until somebody alleviates their pain. And Bhagavad Gita is the medicine. It is directly, Krishna is directly dealing with all aspects of existential crisis that people could possibly be having. So we should feel very empowered when we go out to distribute Bhagavad Gita. We shouldn't just cut them short, you know? Is that okay? Okay, Jacqueline. Take a couple minutes and then stop. Could somebody turn that on for her?
Much earlier, you were speaking of the embryo and it not actually, you know, according to people, being a being or a conscious being. So, unfortunately, that's definitely not true. You know, that's not true at all. I think, I'm not going to elaborate on that too much because we've moved on, but when you were speaking of the book distribution, you know, I didn't do it like, okay, I'm going to go get these books and there's this national contest, but I do it all the time. My gosh, how many Bhagavad Gitas have I given out in the little books, even within the last week? But you have to be very sincere. You have to give them stories. You have to be not condescending. You have to not be proud or anything of such, because people relate to stories and they look in your eyes and they see the sincerity. And then, of course, if they know you personally, you know, your example, your beauty, you know, your inner beauty, of course, and, you know, how successful you are, you know, how do you feel about it? See, if we're struggling, you know, people are like the millennials. People say, okay, oh my God, the millennials. This is a group that is looking for something real.
Yes, so when we go out on book distribution, we have to give people something real. Mm-hmm. Now, if we're still quite neophyte, we are going to go out there with pride, we'll be condescending, we'll be fruitive, but the practice of book distribution will purify us so that we come to the stage of approaching people with real sincerity, with real compassion, with real Krishna consciousness. So we have to practice taking shelter of Paramatma, Krishna in our heart. We want Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, it's his movement. We want Lord Chaitanya to empower us in our heart to speak to people. So I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I don't mean it to be controversial, but I think that there's too much emphasis in our movement about the techniques of book distribution. And seminars are held and workshops are held about the techniques of book distribution. Say these lines, point to these pictures, shake their hand like this, or raise your hand like that, and smile like this. And that's not how books are distributed. Oh, that's how books are distributed externally. But the emphasis is on going out and praying to Lord Chaitanya before you go out, while you're out, and after you come back. We pray before we go out to be empowered. We pray while we're out there to, you know, Krishna sends us the souls who are going to take these books, and we pray afterwards for all those people that we met, that they benefit from the books, and we pray that we don't become puffed up by results. So that's the real technique for book distribution. It doesn't matter how you dress, how you smile, whether you're an introvert, whether you're shy about shaking people's hands, whether you're kind of like not very articulate when you speak. It's all about the heart and nothing more. So when we emphasize or overemphasize the external techniques of book distribution, we unfortunately give neophyte devotees crutches to walk on. And they walk on these crutches and they get the results and they think, I'm a book distributor. Look at me. My name's in the Sankirtan newsletter. Look at my temple. It's got a big score. But then they don't learn to stop walking with those crutches. So let's walk with our real legs, which is, as you've nicely pointed out, the sincerity. People want the real thing, and they can notice it when they see it.
Can I say one word?
Well, we're actually out of time, so we're going to stop there. I'm sorry.
Okay. I can't turn this off.
Okay, somebody can turn that off for her. Unless there's like one quick something. Okay, so thank you for your participation. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yeah, these are tricky to turn off. I don't see how to turn this one off either.